USCHO.com. This is the USCHO Spotlight, a weekly podcast from U.S. College Hockey Online at USCHO.com, featuring conversations with college hockey coaches and players and journalists who cover the sport.
Welcome to USCHO Spotlight for Wednesday, November 17th, 2021. I'm Ed Trefzger alongside Jim Connelly. Well, the team that is just loaded with NHL prospects is off to a terrific start, and that's Michigan.
And joining us now on USCHO Spotlight, head coach of the University of Michigan, that's Mel Pearson. And Mel, a great start to this season. This is a strong team. You're back to number one in the country. What do you like about the way the guys are playing right now?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And Ed, it's good to be with you. We're getting strong playing net. First and foremost, Eric Portillo has played excellent. I think everybody was wondering, who was going to replace Strauss-Mann. And, they will know who Eric Portillo is. He's played extremely well for us. And then, from him out through our defensemen, we've got a really good contingent group led by Nick Blankenberg, our senior, and of course, Owen Power, the sophomore, and then, Luke Hughes, the freshman who's been exceptionally well, played exceptionally well. So, and then up front, we're getting balance. Those young guys are doing a good job leading us in points, but we've got a number of players who can chip in. So I just think the balance, playing extremely well on the road. We have not lost on the road yet. We've been in some tough places. Penn State, we've had trouble down at Penn State. Obviously we went into Duluth. We beat Western Michigan at Western. We lost at Michigan State last year. We won up there. So we've been able to play extremely well on the road. So I think all those factors have really contributed to us getting off to a really good start.
Oh, you mentioned a couple of losses, one to Western, one to Wisconsin, both coming at home. I always feel like teams learn more from their losses sometimes than their wins. What did your team take away from maybe the only two bumps in the road you've had?
We learned a lot, both home games. How to prepare, number one, finding a way to prepare and focus. A lot of noises around this team. And I think when you get home, there's even more noise. You can't control the players on where they're at and what's going on as much as you can. And not to overlook anyone. Western Michigan, we knew as coaches was going to be a heck of a hockey team. And, we won the icebreaker, came home and played Western. And you could just tell right from the get-go, we were not the same team. We weren't mentally sharp. And that had to do a lot of mistakes in that game physically. And then Wisconsin, we beat them the first night and you just think it's going to be easy the next night. It's hard to win one game this day and age if you don't bring your best game. But it's even harder to win two games and sweep anybody. So, but we learned that. We learned, number one, that you have to make sure you're prepared and it doesn't matter who you're playing. And then number two, if you have a good first game, you better have a better second game. And that gives you a better chance to win.
Your team is young. And I guess with youth, even if you have a team of 25, 26-year-olds, you're not guaranteed that every night that these guys can just show up. But the younger it seems a team is, the more that becomes an issue. The consistency night in, night out when it's a young team can be hard. What do you as a coach have to do to maintain that level? I mean, you can only throw chairs and get excited and, yell so much. How do you keep your guys, focused in situations like that?
Well, that's a good point. And we do have a young team. There's no doubt about it, but we rely on them preparing. We have a saying, when the time to perform has arrived, the time to prepare is long gone. So we talk about that a lot and making sure you're ready to go and just try to point out that, you might have success one night, but that doesn't guarantee any success the next night. Might give you some confidence, but you have to make sure you come and play and perform. And just trying to keep the young guys. One of the factors too, Jim, is it's really interesting to me. We didn't play in front of crowds last year, either at home or on the road. And, I think we've been okay on the road. We like the crowds. It's been really good. Half our team has never played in front of crowds. So it's sort of interesting, but I find at home, it's almost like this, we want to perform or we put too much pressure on ourselves. And so we're trying to take some of that pressure off our players, some of the expectations. Matty Beniers, struggled to score out of the gate, and he didn't seem like the same player. And, we just had some conversations and told him, hey, just be who you are. Seattle drafted you, Matty, because of the player you are and the person you are. That's the player they want. Don't worry about, the numbers. Just go out and work hard and play your game. And, once he did that and took some of that pressure off himself, I think he's got 7 goals now in the last 4 games. So he's been really good. But just little things like that. Just because you get drafted, number 2 overall, doesn't mean all of a sudden you become this different player. You have to just go with the player you are and perform up to your potential. And Matty's done that since. But he's just one example of some of that outside noise, the pressure. We're just trying to take that off of them and just continue to grow and, be the people they are and play their game.
Following up on the topic of young players, you have some 03s who are going to face 97 or 98 birth year players. Any particular challenges coaching a young team against players that are more matured physically?
Yeah, that's a good question, Ed. And there's not much you can really do about it because, we can't go down and buy more strength or more weight down at the 7-Eleven. That it's a natural, you just have to naturally let that occur and obviously get a good summer in the weight room. So because they're young, their bodies, some of them still aren't developed. We have boy strength, and then we're playing against a lot of teams who have man strength. They're older and you can't do much about that. All we can do is make sure that we play. There's 2 things we can control is our effort and our attitude. And if we put those 2 things in check, we've got a strong enough team. We've got some older, strong guys too, that we can, overcome that. But it's a grind because we've seen the first 6 weeks here as teams are trying to, take us out of the game physically. I'm almost to the point of it. It's I don't want to say out of control, but it's almost too much. And but we have to play through that, and that's all we can do. And just to make sure that we're mentally tough and that we play physical as well.
Michigan is probably among maybe 8 or 10 teams nationally that can perennially get the blue chip players. So you've got a lot of top talent in there. How do you keep everybody happy, knowing that not everybody is going to get to be on the power play and things like that? What kind of a challenge is that for you?
That's, I think, our biggest challenge is just making sure that we find a way to keep everybody happy, whether that's ice time, whether that's playing on the power play, whether that's playing on a certain line. That is the biggest challenge, that we get everybody on the same page playing for Michigan and accepting their roles. So far, so good. I give a lot of credit to our seniors. We have really a good leadership, and they've done a nice job of setting the tone with the team. But yeah, it's a week-to-week struggle, is making sure that we try to get everybody in a position where they can have success. And that's all you're trying to do is, managing people and trying to put the young men in a position that they can have success and just be happy for each other. Some nights it's not going to be your night. You're not going to be the guy who's putting up the points, but it might be your line mate or a guy in a different line. And just really being happy for each other. Easier said than done. I find myself looking at the ice time more and more than I ever have to see how it ends up on a game and who's played what, and just make sure we try to get it equal, as much as we can, equal distribution amongst our players. But we've got a good team. They understand that the roles that they have and what their expectations are. But still, that'll be the proof will be in the pudding. But so far, so good.
More with Michigan Wolverines head coach Mel Pearson in a moment.
This is the USCHO Spotlight, a weekly podcast from US College Hockey Online.
We're talking with Michigan head coach Mel Pearson. Back at the beginning of the season, a coach who was watching your team play talked about your power play being scary good. You had 4 first-rounders and a high second-rounder on that. It seems you've mixed some stuff up a little bit on the power play since then. How have you been approaching special teams, particularly the power play?
Yeah, we probably loaded that one group up. They had a lot of success early, and then it went south a little bit. We weren't having as much success, and I think at one point we had like 3 of those guys on different lines, so it's really hard after the power plays. Trying to get our next lineup or next couple lines. So we split them up. We split that group up more as to what lines they're on, and I think they've been really good since that time. And we almost could have 3 groups. We just got Johnny Beecher back, and Johnny's played on our power play in the past. He hasn't been out there yet, but as we look at our team, we feel we're deep enough. Jacob Truscott's another player who could be run the power play on their point. We've been out without Nick Blankenberg, who's been really good on the power play early. We haven't had him the last 4 games, and he's coming back. So, yeah, it creates some issues. We have an extremely deep and talented team. We kid all the time. We probably could have 3 power plays, but we have the 2 groups right now that we really like and feel we'll have a lot of success with.
One more thing on being one of those top 8 or 10 teams. You know that you're going to have players maybe after a couple of seasons who are going to be at the right point to turn pro. And so you're always going to have to probably recruit more players than other teams that don't have as many blue chip players do. How do you approach recruiting, and how far out are you looking at players in order to make sure you're replenished each year?
Great point. Roster management is huge. And, you throw in the transfer portal. Players don't feel they're getting the ice time they want. You could lose, a couple of kids in the transfer portal. We're recruiting about 3 years out right now, but we feel we've got a good group coming in next year. We have some discussions with the player before the year starts, and so their NHL team that they've been drafted by, and just try to get a feel for what they're thinking. If they know, hey, we're going to take Owen Power out. Buffalo says we're taking them after this year. We got to get them out. We got to get them into our system. We understand that. So I think you probably have 2 or 3 guys, Ed, that are destined to sign, and then you got a group of 3 or 4 guys you're not sure about. Just depending how the year plays out and what happens. So you have to be able to pivot quickly from losing a player and make sure you have players lined up that will come in case you lose a player. And a lot of times in recruiting, we say, hey, you know what? You got so-and-so scholarship. If he leaves, you come in. If he goes back, we need you to play another year of junior hockey. And sometimes players are okay with that, recruits, and sometimes they're not. So, but roster management has become a huge thing now. And not only for your players that might sign pro that you're not sure about, but again, the transfer portal is really thrown another curveball, I think, at us all.
Mel, what was your summer like this past summer? I feel like, teams are recruiters, coaches are natural recruiters, but it felt like you were a retention specialist this summer. And that was probably more of what your job was. You're the guy that HR would love to have on your team because you need to, keep your employees happy, but you kept a lot of guys happy enough that they came back this season.
Yeah. And, extremely happy and proud of the fact that, that those guys have the faith in our program and the direction, the development that we're doing to come back. There are a lot of things I think factors have played into it, but you're right. So my summer was a little crazy. The draft, as you know, got pushed back to July. So all of a sudden, you're not sure who's going to get picked where, who's going to come back. School started in August, so there was a real short window there just to understand, who we might lose. And so it was hectic to say the least. But a lot of really good conversations over the summer. Really felt like I got to know the parents and some people in NHL teams a lot better, and as well as our players. Just the honest discussions you have about it. And I wasn't sure. I had a good feeling we'd get a couple of them back, but I don't think we expected to get them all back. And good for them. School was important. Development was important. The way the season ended last year, not having a chance to play in the national tournament, that was important to them, that that they come back and have an opportunity to chase the championship. So I think they came back for all the right reasons, mainly the academics, development, obviously to chase the championship and to play with each other. They're they're a fun group. They're a tight group. And, we're so happy to have them all back.
You're 5-1 right now in the Big Ten. Notre Dame on the schedule this weekend. I know that you've watched a lot of Jeff Jackson teams over the years, so you know some of their tendencies. But this feels like a little different Notre Dame team this year. What do you see when you look at them on tape?
Yeah, they are. I think they've expanded their offensive game. Playing more puck possession, trying to play a more up tempo game than maybe they have in the past. Obviously, Jeff has. They've done a great job at Notre Dame, always been strong defensively from the net out, and they are this year. But at the same time, they've expanded their offensive game. So dangerous team. I mean, they're as good as anybody we played so far. So when you just look at the tape and look at their roster, and they've got some outstanding players. They got the transfer in goal. They've got a couple of real solid transfer defensemen, and they've got a good returning cast from last year up front. So, they've given us fits to at Yost. I think we're at something like 2-6 in our last games at Yost Ice Arena against Notre Dame. We pointed that out to our team yesterday just to remind them that, just because we're at home, it doesn't mean a whole hill of beans unless we show up and play our game and go after them. So expect 2 really hard fought games against an excellent team that, I think in our league will be in the mix at the end of the year.
A lot of skill on the ice in that series, no doubt. Mel, it's always great talking to you. Your Michigan team, they're playing great. Keep up the good work. And we'll be definitely catching up with you, I'm sure, again, as this season rolls on.
Yeah, it's always great to talk hockey. And it's going to be another interesting year. As you can see, the scores right now and teams beating teams. It's great for college hockey. On any given night, anyone can win. And we've seen that already. So thanks for having me on, and look forward to the next time we get together.
That's Michigan head coach Mel Pearson. Jim, I always love talking to Mel, but I'm fascinated by the topic of roster management with all the blue chip players. What is it? 7 first rounders on his squad and some other high picks.
It's really difficult. Especially, he was telling us off the air a little bit about the Big Ten and the fact that, if you know that you've got a guy that's going to be leaving at the end of the season, you can't go out because of the Big Ten rules and offer his scholarship to somebody else. There's a couple, I guess they allow a couple these days, but you can't even manage scholarships the same way. And to have that with maybe on a given year, 5 players, let's say 5, that's maybe even a low number for where they are now. It could be 7, it could be 8, it could be 10 players this year that he's trying to figure out if they're going to stay or go at the end of the summer. That becomes almost a full-time job in coaching. And I likened it to being in the HR world and trying to retain your best talent, but it's really difficult. And the decisions are never just the player anymore. It's the NHL organization. It's the advisor, agent, whatever you want to call them. Then you have your parents that are trying to influence you. There's just so many people pulling at every player. So as the head coach, you've got to build those relationships with the parents, with the agents, with the NHL GMs and front offices, so that you can know when players are probably going to be going and when players aren't. And that's a really big challenge. I think that Mel Pearson did a great job this past summer, keeping guys around. But it's difficult. It's really challenging.
Some people might say, well, anybody could coach a team that loaded with talent, but I've drawn the parallel with teams like Michigan to the late 90s, early 2000s New York Yankees, loaded with talent. But Joe Torre had to manage all those great talents and make them into a cohesive team. And that takes a special skill that it seems like Mel Pearson is well suited for.
It's very difficult. And I've seen coaches struggle with it. You're dealing with players who are going to have to play on your third, maybe even your fourth line or your third D pair that have their entire lives been first line players and always on the power play. You're going to have players in your lineup that don't get the ice time that they want. It's how you manage those players and how you manage their expectations. Mel kind of mentioned the transfer portal. That becomes one of the biggest threats to a team that has a lot of high-end talent, because you'll have good players. A third or a fourth line player at Michigan might be a second or even a first line player at other certain schools. So would that player that you like, that you know you need next year, maybe more than you need them this year, will they be in the transfer portal looking to go somewhere else because they didn't get what they wanted this season? So I think as a coach, you almost have to be, consistently managing the expectations of the players. That's a challenge as well.
I'm not a big college basketball fan, but I have been noticing what's going on in the transfer portal in basketball. And that may be a precursor of what we see in hockey.
Yeah, it could be. Basketball is a little bit different just because the numbers are different in terms of number of opportunities on a roster. You have a lot, basically more than double on a college hockey roster. So the basketball transfer portal is a little bit different. But yeah, I mean, the transfer, we've talked about it almost all season and in the entire offseason as we were getting toward the end of last season. It's now a tool for these players, and the opportunity to transfer one time without any penalty, without needing to sit out. It really does bring a level of a free agency feel to the game. And we talked about it with Derek Schooley on Monday. Is that a good thing for every team? Everybody has a way that they can benefit. You can always pull in transfers as much as you can lose them, but are you pulling in players that are of equal value to the ones you lose? And that's always a challenge. I wouldn't want to be a modern day hockey coach. That's a job that I think is a little bit more difficult than, my stomach has the appetite to handle.
And we never even got into name, image, and likeness, which is another piece of the puzzle. Where can you go where you're going to make money on that kind of stuff? Are you going to be better off at a big name program? Are you going to be better off depending on who drafted you in the NHL and get people wanting to get your stuff ahead of time? Or are you going to be better in a small market? Boy, those are all things we're going to have to tackle down the road. But that is another piece of the pie. It seems like in the last 5 years, things have gotten way, way more complex.
Way complex. Again, my stomach, my brain does not comprehend it all. So I give credit to these 60 plus men's Division I hockey coaches. Same thing for the women's. I think that they face some of these same challenges. It's changed the dynamic of the game, many ways for the better, but many ways much more complex.
Well, with that, we'll wrap up this edition of USCHO Spotlight. For Jim Connelly, I'm Ed Trefzger, and we'll catch you next time.
This has been the USCHO Spotlight, a production of US College Hockey Online. Visit uscho.com/podcasts to listen or subscribe.